Hi, this is Bryan too, in Quito, Ecuador, April 26, 2017, about 9:30 at night, 9:15 at night. I want to talk about memory erasure, specifically the electronic dissolution of memory, and how the various means by which CIA and DIA trauma-based mind control hive mind teams erase the memory or specific memories of their victims because that's what they're doing to me. That's why they keep targeting me with drowsiness every time I try to read the Bible or listen to Christian content, etc. Training, research, and development. And they're targeting my faith and belief system, my Christian faith and belief system. I know that may be hard for people to understand now, but in 20 years, you'll believe it. You know, it won't help me then, but you'll believe it. And it's not just me. There are millions of people targeted. Most don't even know it. Um, and that's because a larger and larger pool of people is needed in order to perfect the effectiveness of large-scale deployment of this technology, as they're scaling it up for all 318 million Americans. So, um, what they're doing is they're using selective memory erasure and thought filters to do that. It's called filtering. Basically, uh, there was a movie a while back. I can't remember the name of it. But people could remove selected memories that were too painful for them to deal with electronically using neuroscience um, and specific streams of electromagnetic low frequency waves. They were able to do this. And it was a movie about it, Sunshine on the something, I can't remember. Um, but the CIA can actually do that. They can actually remove selected memories from the victim. They can erase memory. They can do it by different means. They can do it by electronic dissolution of memory. That's called EDOM, electronic dissolution of memory, EDOM. Notice that's a religious metaphor. EDOM is a religious word. The Department of Defense loves to name its weapon systems using religious and mythical metaphors: trident, submarine, harp, uh, etc. There, this it just stands for electronic dissolution of memories, EDOM. But they can also do it by other means: amplification of the acetylcholine levels of the brain, extreme trauma for the erasure of short-term memory, etc. Um, and this program has that capability. It basically they target once your brain. What they're doing is they're mapping your brain to a cognitive model. They're building a. If you're a trauma-based mind control victim, and anybody can be heterodyne, anybody can be mind controlled. That has because all 318 million Americans have this technology in their body and don't even know it. The government has been spraying nanotechnology into the hydrosphere for the last 25 years. And the nanotechnology filters down from the hydrosphere into the water supply and the food chain, and now 318 million Americans have been affected, every man, woman, and child, with this technology. The nanotechnology, once it's in your body, it migrates from the bloodstream to the brain and adheres to the neurotransmitters in your brain. It's there for life and can speak to and decode those neurotransmitters. All the CIA and DIA have to do in order to mind control a victim is simply target them with a specific stream of electromagnetic low frequency waves. They can be heterodyned easily. Anyone can. But as far as, you know, trauma-based mind control, mapping a person's brain into a cognitive model, no, that's more difficult and simple than just simple heterodyning. Although heterodyning is part of that. So I want to get to the fact that once that that signal, um, once you're targeted with this technology and your mind, your personality, your will, intellect, and emotion have been duplicated, then the external half of that signal, uh, the external they duplicate the entire they create a copycat parallel twin personality within the victims within the remote neural networks of their supercomputer, and once that's duplicated with an internal signal, half of that signal it becomes your brain's own normal electrochemical processes, but the other half becomes the mind controlled cognitive model simulation. I'm sorry, I'm sleep deprived of your brain. So they just run it fast forward or slow it down, depending on what they're trying to achieve. So half of the signal of the brain is adapted to be dependent upon that external mind control model, running in sync with the other half of the signal of your brain, which is your own normal memory and thought process, your brain's own normal electrochemical processes. When I say electrical, I mean, I should say electromagnetic. But the point is, your brain no longer has the energy, especially because you're sleep deprived. They use sleep deprivation for this purpose a lot. So anything that affects a person's will, intellect, energy level, and vitality makes the person more susceptible to mind control programming. So half of the signal is your brain that becomes adapted and dependent upon the external mind control model, cognitive model, running in sync with the other half of the normal electrochemical processes of your brain. So your brain the neural pathways of your brain no longer have the energy necessary to induct the neural groups, the cognitive clusters, those groups to reach a full state of consciousness, alert, beta state, alpha state. So think of it like this. Think of it like that your thoughts are based on instead of thinking about it in terms of just electromagnetic energy, think of it in terms of momentum and inertia. If a train has enough momentum and inertia, it can get over the hill. But if the train doesn't have enough momentum and inertia, it can't get over the hill. Well, your thoughts no longer have, because they're dependent upon that model, and the neural pathways can no longer conduct themselves through the normal biological processes. Your memories no longer have the momentum and inertia to get up over the hill. So they begin to fade. They literally are bleached out. That's how a person's brain chemistry begins to adapt to that extra energy through the biological processes. It's like a person who's addicted to drugs, or their body begins to tolerate it and then to become dependent upon that drug in order to function and survive. Well, especially when you're sleep deprived, your brain becomes dependent upon this stream of fabricated, falsified stream of electromagnetic energy in order to function. And so, one would never know that the entire human soul of that person, their informational essence, their will, intellect, and emotion, that cognitive model of their human soul was being held in a vast array of supercomputers, of remote neural networks of supercomputers in some underground top secret military facility. So the point I'm trying to make is that's electronic dissolution of memory, simply targeting you with electromagnetic low frequency waves, probing your memories to force memory recall, establishing memory anchors, and then once those memory anchors are established, to begin to target those specific memories in order to erase them. It's called electronic dissolution of memory. So by forcing memory recall, the cognitive model that they've created can turn off your memories, can just switch them off. So it's really complicated to understand. It basically involves a filtering system of the victim's normal brainwave patterns, alpha, beta, delta, theta, etc. But if that person once the memory is probed and the memory anchor is established, once the active filtering recognition system of the victim's brainwave patterns is established, if the person begins to recall that filtered memory, or have what they term, these hive mind teams, they call it rehabilitation by torture, what they term to have a non-government sanctioned thought or emotion, then the filter that they've created can dampen that mental process in the mind control victim. So that's electronic dissolution of memory. That's EDOM. Okay, it's more complicated than that, but the point is, TAMI, the thought memory interface. That's where two minds are linked through what's called. It's not called thought memory interface. It's called something similar to that, but I can't remember the name of it. But that's a good way to describe it. It's a software hive mind team configuration of software using a thought. It's basically a thought memory interface where every thought is shared between the clone member of the hive mind team, the psychologist, psychiatrist, neuroscientist, etc., and the mind control victim. So when the victim begins to start thinking about something, and they, that's a non-government sanctioned thought. They don't want you thinking about that. They want to drive your memory and thought process in this direction. You begin thinking about stuff in that direction. You begin to think something else. Then all the clone member has to do is just suddenly just blank his mind, and your mind blanks. His cognitive processes are cloned. His brain waves are cloned to your brain waves. So that by blanking his own mind, by the blanking of their mind, the hive mind teams. When I say what I mean is when I say they, it forces memory recall of the target's mind to be blocked. Also, you can't remember. So that's how thought redirection works. When you're thinking about one thing, they want you to think about something else. That's how they redirect your thought, your normal memory and thought process. So, memories are just basically electromagnetic inductions of brain entrainments. Your brain is constantly entrained to the system. They're building a cognitive model of your brain using physical and psychological trauma to map out the sensory and neural pathways of your brain. They're probing your memories to build a profile. So, that may only be a temporary mechanism. There are other mechanisms, such as the amplification of acetylcholine levels in the victim's brain, that can be achieved. But the point is, that's how memory erasure occurs. So there are less severe and more severe methods of doing it. One of the more severe is just brutal trauma. Just brutal trauma. It just uses overstimulation, information overload, basically, to degrade your ability to recall memory, your normal memory and thought process. Anytime you think of something, it becomes a memory. The moment you think of it, doesn't matter. It may be short-term memory or long-term memory. You have three categories of memory: sensory memory, short-term memory, which is anything less than 30 seconds, long-term memory, which is anything more than 30 seconds. This technology is designed to target your short-term memory, which their scientists call active memory, because those are the thoughts that you're actively thinking about, that they're trying to modify. So this technology is designed to modify your active memory, your short-term memory. Okay? So overstimulation or information overload, basically a denial of service, denial of your ability to function, to function and survive, the denial of your normal cognitive processes, the denial of your normal memory and thought process. It's achieved by information overload, by just it's just so complicated. I don't fully understand it myself, but the technology is designed to predict and influence your reference choices during thought composition. Well, that's what they're targeting. They're targeting thought composition, your thought composition. And don't think because this doesn't involve me. It involves you. The technology is already in your body, idiot, fool. You're a fool if you don't know that this involves you. This involves every man, woman, and child in America, and eventually every industrialized nation in the world. Okay? That's where we're headed with this technology. So they're basically work similar to the Satan system, silent assassination through amplified neurons. They're basically using neuron amplification technology to achieve this capability of erasure of memory. They have weaponized neuroscience. Neuroscience is no longer a field of medicine. It's now crossed the threshold of medical science and is now a chief weapons platform, neuroscience, by the major intelligence agencies of the world. So that's EDOM. EDOM basically uses hypnosis and what's called signal coherence changes in the victim's memory and thought process in order to erase your memory, to blank your memory, to prevent normal memory recall. It's electronic dissolution of memory. Now, that involves long-term, brutal, severe psychological trauma and abuse. That's why they call it trauma-based mind control. It's called trauma-based mind control for a reason. Trauma-based mind control cannot exist without brutal, just absolute brutal physical and psychological trauma. So, anyway, there's other ways that they can do it. They can do it by amplification of the acetylcholine levels of the victim's brain. They can they're basically, the brain has a tendency to protect itself from extreme trauma, and one of the ways that it protects itself from extreme trauma is to regress to if it's extreme brutal trauma, then the erasure of short-term memory can be achieved by causing the trauma to begin to regress that memory. That's how people deal with child abuse. They forget. They forget that they were targeted with child abuse to begin with. So the neural networks in their brain don't function properly because they begin to suppress that memory. The brain is suppressing the memory in order to protect itself. So basically, it's just neuron amplification technology. That's what it is. And extreme psychological trauma and the amplification of acetylcholine levels of brain in the brain, and severe brutal physical and psychological trauma, causing the victim to repress and suppress the psychological abuse in order to be able to function properly. So, that's all a part of mind mapping. That's all a part of mapping out your brain by forcing you to constantly respond to their specific stimuli, to their constant situational and conversational scenarios. So each time you respond, it creates an electromagnetic emission pattern in your brain. And that electromagnetic emission pattern is remotely measured by the supercomputer and downloaded at the speed of light back into its database as it continues to build a cognitive model of your brain. So, this is really, I'm not a neuroscientist, and I don't really fully understand it myself, but they do use, and hypnosis doesn't work on everybody, by the way, so it's not always an option. But, the CIA and the Department of Defense, they control the mainstream media because they can't, they control the mainstream media. They always have, there's no such thing as freedom of the press. That's an illusion. It's a lie. The government, the so-called mainstream media, is nothing more than a government talking points propaganda machine, okay? But they cannot control, they absolutely cannot control the internet. And the reason they can't control it is because it's too decentralized. It's too balkanized. So what they do is they flood the internet with disinformation, misinformation, and misdirection tactics. Disinformation is lies. Misinformation is half-truths. Misdirection tactics. For example, they'll flood the internet with some crazy information, disinformation. They'll start talking about mind control and how real it is, and then they'll say, the news article is saying, yeah, the aliens are behind it. Well, obviously, because the person reading the article doesn't believe in aliens, they automatically dismiss mind control too. Because the technology is just so sophisticated, people can't understand it. Because people operate off the natural philosophy that the simplest answer is always the truth. The more complicated and sophisticated the truth becomes, the more unbelievable it becomes for the ordinary person to accept. It's called the Occam razor principle. It's same with you. If you want to discredit someone, people operate off this natural philosophy that the simplest answer is always the truth. So if you ever want to discredit someone, just come up with some incredibly sufficiently complex scheme or method to do that. So, involving the most fanciful and fantastic tactics and methods imaginable. And because people operate off the, that philosophy that the simplest answer is always the truth, they'll never believe you. I've had them engage in some of the most trivial, paltry, fanciful, and absolutely fantastic tactics imaginable to me. Try explaining to the courts that 100 people are following you. It's just not possible. It's just not possible. And they know that, and that's why they do it. Organized stalking is done for various reasons. Surveillance, keep the victim from defeating the technology, provoke the victim into emotional responses which can be remotely measured and integrated back into R&M data, but also to discredit the victim. And it does take that many people and more. Why? Because placing and keeping a trauma-based mind control victim into a psychotronic concentration camp is no small operation. This is about training, research, and development. They've got hundreds of billions of dollars invested in this technology. That's why. That's what's happening to so many people. But the point I was trying to make was they flood the internet with these keyword search terms like, conspiracy theory, in order to brainwash uneducated, ignorant people about this technology. So people, when you try to talk about it to people, they think, well, no, this guy's crazy. No, you're the one who doesn't know the truth. You're the one who's ignorant of the truth. And they're saying, or eventually will say they haven't come to that point yet. Well, we did it for the betterment of humanity to turn the world into a neuro society where we could speak to each other by our brain waves, synthetic telepathy, for example, where we could communicate with computers by our brain waves, etc., etc. We're way beyond artificial intelligence. This is artificial life, people. But all of that's a lie. This technology was designed to censor and control the masses. And you're next real soon. In 10 years, this technology will be on the market. You'll be able to make a cell phone call with your brainwaves, hands-free, without a cell phone, of course. It's Bryan too, in Quito, Ecuador. I'm just severely sleep deprived, trying to get through it. They do it in cycles, and I'm talking about how they erase memory from the victim. Of course, if the victim keeps reading the Bible and keeps listening to Christian content, then that doesn't work very well, does it? If hostile governments like to the Americans, like the Ecuadorians and the Nicaraguans and the Cubans and the Russians and the Chinese are watching while the torture's going on, it doesn't work very well either, does it? So they got to get rid of the victim. That's what they're doing to me. They're killing me slowly, or at least they have been up to this point. Who knows what they'll do next? But the point is, they're here's the sign that I made. I said I wanted it to be cardboard. Basically says, stop the electronic harassment. Mr. President of Ecuador, stop the torture, stop the organized stalking. Says a lot more than that on the other side. And when you're traveling around the world exposing their atrocities while they're torturing you, they don't like that. They got to get rid of you. And they told me that. They said, you're a dead man. They come after me with machetes and knives and everything else, telling me I was a dead man. The CIA doesn't threaten to kill you. If the CIA is going to kill you, they just kill you. The only time they threaten to do it is when they want you to shut up. They want you to be quiet. But the threat is real, and they mean it. And I'll soon die. The victim, trauma-based mind control victims die prematurely because their bodies simply cannot sustain the level of torture and trauma to their internal organs. It's just not possible. No one could. I had no heart problems before this targeting began, 20 years ago, and before they specifically began targeting my heart in 2007. I had no problem with my ears and my hearing, before these brutal attacks began. And now I was targeted since at least since 1997, 1998, because that's when they first used voice of God weapons on me in the Cayman Islands. And the Nicaraguans would know and have records of the fact that I was targeted by law enforcement 20 years ago. They've been hiding behind law enforcement and using law enforcement to do their dirty work for the last 20 years because trauma-based mind control requires 24/7 surveillance. Without 24/7 surveillance of the victim, there's no way for them to verify their technology. The verification process breaks apart, mind control fails. So they use law enforcement and convince the world you're a terrorist, a spy, a drug lord, a rapist, a child molester, Al-Qaeda, whatever, to make them believe that they need to keep you under constant surveillance. They're hiding behind law enforcement. They have been for years. All of my computers and smartphones, everything's hijacked,